This week's episode of the podcast, we are joined by Jason Kendrick and Kirk Samuels, who return to the podcast as the Mad Men of Masculinity. And today we talk all about how porn and addiction impact relationships. We also discussed what holds men back in finding what they're looking for in relationships. And we close out today's conversation with Jason and Kirk's own wishes for all men to understand that they could benefit from knowing right now. We are sponsored by the Center for Shared Insight, and Dr. Kristen Hick has written a recent blog on why online dating is so confusing, and she gives recommendations on how to build an authentic experience while dating online. There are so many reasons that we encounter why online dating is inauthentic, but it can also be a positive experience of finding a partnership that suits your life for what you're looking for best right now. If you're looking for a little more support right now, head on over to the centerforsharedinsight.com and book a complimentary consultation with Dr. Kristen Hick now. Dr. Kristen Hick is going to join us on October 20th in our private group to bring all of her expertise and advice to modern dating. To save your seat for that October 20th and all group calls up until then, head on over to our Instagram profile or our website and join the group now. Our goals in the group is to create a safe space where you can join a group of like-minded people who want to move forward together towards creating their ideal relationship and finding their ideal partner. If you'd like more information, send us a direct message on Instagram now. Without further delay, let's get into today's episode with Jason and Kirk, the Mad Men of Masculinity. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am honored to be rejoined by Jason Kendrick and Kirk Samuels, the Mad Men of Masculinity. We are going to jump right into men's work today. What's going on, gentlemen?
Another fun day.
Right.
You've both been on the podcast individually. I did not know that you were BFFs.
Oh man, I'm telling you, we call each other in the morning and pick out the same clothes and everything.
That's right.
That's how we, don't judge us. Don't judge us.
For some reason, don't believe you for a second. But no, you guys are good friends. You're close. You are the Mad Men of Masculinity. So thanks again for hosting me last week or two on your Facebook Live, talking about the hero syndrome, and what a conversation that was.
Yeah, that was a fun conversation, and I think we've gotten a lot of responses to that because it's so ubiquitous for us men that it's in there. I've got to be a hero in the bedroom. I've got to be the best I can be, and if I don't feel like I satisfied her, then I've got issues. So,
which I mean, even that at its core comes down to where are we getting our sense of validation. I think that's where we landed for the most part. Where are we getting our sense of validation as guys and as men, and are we looking to that to somehow make us something, or are we, something, and then we bring that to whatever it is that we're doing, whether it be a relationship or something else.
Right. Yeah, totally agree with that. And seeking validation outside of ourselves is not a good recipe for success. And I think that we get caught in that trap because we're always performance based. Like, how well did I do? How good did I do? Did you finish first? Is the question that we ask.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really, I mean, in life, if you even take that to a bigger picture, it's not about finishing first, it's about finishing well.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, when we get caught up in finishing first, well, I don't want to finish my life before you two. I don't want to.
Fair enough.
I'd rather you two guys finish before me in terms of life. But at the same time, whenever we finish, I want to make sure we finish well.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to that. We had an episode about the new alpha male and how in different parts of your life, you may be the alpha, you may be the beta, you may be some other letter in the alphabet. And it's really just about being the best you can be and finishing as well as you can finish. If you're committed to having to finish first and everything, then there's underlying self-esteem issues there. Because why do you have to be first everything? Why can't you just play and do your best?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that resonates with me a lot, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, there was we actually, during that conversation, we talked about it. It's funny because, we all have that come in first thing and we all get to be the alpha in certain different areas of our life, but the CEO is not going to be the alpha in prison or vice versa or on the football field. Or so it's like, where are you the alpha? Where are you where are your strengths, and focus on those, and then embrace your weaknesses as just part of that. Because I mean, if we were all having to be the best at everything we do, then it sounds pretty tiresome. Sounds like I'm not going to get a lot of sleep.
Yeah, sounds exhausting. And the only competition we have is the person we were yesterday. Yeah,
Yes,
you guys
sir.
are not my competition, and I am not yours. That's a bad way to enter a relationship between men.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we really talk about a lot is the nice guy syndrome, and that nice guys tend to look at other guys as an example of maybe their father or some bully, or they kind of demonize other men as, oh, they're going to be mean to me and bully me, and so then they tend to look to the feminine more for their validation, and look and surround themselves with the feminine because they're afraid of men. But we all know, I mean, we talk about this, I don't know how many times, that we need men in our lives to be masculine men, to have that masculine energy. You know, iron sharpens iron, men sharpen men. If we are looking at the other men as like, oh, I've got to compete with him, and then I got to worry about what he thinks or says or whatnot, then we're not coming in authentic. We're not being our authentic selves, and we're too caught up in one-upping each other instead of just being present with each other.
You know, and there's also a scarcity mentality with that too, in terms of, you know, it's a plus one minus one kind of thing. Like, you know, in order for me to be up, you got to be down, and you know, kind of along those lines. And you know, I mean, quite honestly, you know, a lot of the battles that we face today, not only as men individually and as men collectively, but also as a society. I mean, these are battles today. I mean, you look at 2020, for example, man, we got a whole lot of things going on and a whole lot of fronts to fight on. It's going to take all of us to solve some of these problems, man. It's going to take all of us to not only solve our internal battles, but our external ones as well. And so if I need you to lose in order for me to win, then the math is off. Then we're out of balance. When in actuality, I need both Dave and Jason to help me to join in with this. I mean, we're taking on Thanos. I mean, this takes like all of the Avengers, right? So, I mean, we got to bring our superpowers together. And when we bring our superpowers together, it's a multiplicity kind of thing. And we multiply our gifts, we multiply our strength, we multiply just, you know, who we are and our presence and our purpose and all those things. And you know, and we can solve some of these problems. But a lot of these problems won't get solved with the mentality of it's either me or you.
That's right. Yeah, I was actually, now that you bring it up, it reminds me of my journaling practice this morning, where I was grateful writing about my gratitude for jujitsu, which makes me more resilient, grounded, and centered to face all of that which comes at me from different angles every single day in 2020. Mm-hmm. You know, and if I'm too worried about my one up, one down with you men, then that takes the resiliency out of my hands. It's like it's not being self-led over here if I'm always focused on the external.
Yeah, I mean, it turns into a zero-sum game. I mean, if you're competing with somebody else trying to beat them and not being 100% your authentic self and showing your strengths, I mean, I can't beat Dave at being Dave. I can't beat Kirk at being Kirk. And I can barely beat Jason at being Jason most days. So it's just about being the best I can be in each moment and bringing those superpowers together, like Kirk talks about, of what are my strengths? What are your strengths? And bringing those together versus trying to compete with each other and put each other down. It doesn't do anybody any good. And it puts us all down versus supporting each other and going, what are you good at? What are your strengths? How can we combine and create that super team?
Right. Yeah. My flame does not burn brighter because I dim yours, Jason.
No.
And I'm so glad to chat with you guys today. I want to catch up with both of you. Jason, who are you? Just give me a quick 30-second synopsis of who you are before we move on to the nuts and bolts meat of our conversation today.
Well, right on. I'm Jason B. Kendrick, the Connection Catalyst. I am one half of the Mad Men of Masculinity. I focus on masculine and feminine dynamics, communication, listening. I work with singles, couples, businesses, all about how to be more present, better communicators, and how to create better relationships in your life in all areas.
Man, such an honor to have you. Kirk, give me your 30-second quick rundown of who you are.
Right on. I am Kirk M. Samuels, the intimacy incubator. With strength, wisdom, gentleness, and mercy, I co-create a world of intimacy and unconditional connection by teaching and inspiring 1 million men how to live free from internet pornography.
Boom. I love the specificity there, Kirk. Let's talk about porn and what it does to our our already busy minds, and how does it take away from our intimate relationships?
Oh man, well, I mean, it's an artificial sweetener. And everything I do is I mean, first and foremost, everything I do is kind of from my own story. So there's never any judgment, and I'm speaking from having been there, done that, 30 of the first 40 years of my life, kind of thing. You know, I mean, it becomes intimacy becomes an external thing as opposed to an internal thing. It becomes something that you consume as opposed to something that you contribute to. And I mean, it ends up being kind of almost a relationship killer, definitely an intimacy killer. When I say intimacy, from a guy perspective, it's easy for us to think that that's purely sexual. Women kind of get easier than guys, although that's kind of questionable sometimes these days. But women more so understand that intimacy is a bigger picture. It's a holistic kind of thing. When we have true intimacy, it's a mind, body, and soul, spirit kind of thing. And so, I have some of my greatest intimacy, deep intimacy with guys, non-sexual. And so yeah, when you consume sexuality for recreation, again, it ends up just making intimacy become something that's done in the garage as opposed to something that's done in the kitchen.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, now that you bring that up, when I envision porn use, it's almost like, how quick and how hard can I beat myself up to finish this thing? Like, let me just get this done. Oh, I'm gonna get walked on, here by my folks in my teenage years, or I'm gonna get walked on by my partner because I just feel like I'm killing the intimacy there. And a phrase that I'm reminded of is that porn is entertainment, not education, when it comes to informing us about sex.
Yeah, and it's about me. I mean, porn is about me. It's about my gratification. Is about filling my cup. It's me, 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 me. And in order to have intimacy, deep relationship, which all guys want, all guys want intimacy. We all want that unconditional love and connection. But when we kind of take I'm going to say the easier route, when we take the recreational route, the consumeristic route, then it just becomes about me, and it becomes how much can I consume, and that is the opposite of relationship. You won't have a successful relationship if you're only focused on yourself and me and what can I consume and what do I get. I mean, that's a transaction, and that's the farthest thing from a relationship, a true relationship in any kind of way that there is in humanity.
I feel that wholeheartedly. Yeah, I think that that's one contributing factor to what holds men back in relationships. Jason, in your opinion, what holds men back from finding what they're looking for in relationship?
Well, just the looking outside of ourselves. I mean, being that looking for validation outside of ourselves, and even to go back to the porn issue, I mean, if we look at ourselves as a battery that needs recharging, or as we look at ourselves as this energetic being, that instead of concentrating and using our energy in a conscious way, we're actually depleting ourselves by watching porn and using things like that. We're not actually building up that sexual energy and that polarity. And a lot of times what I find with a lot of people who have dealt with this, I mean, I've dealt with it myself, we become less attractive, we become less energized, we become less focused when we consume porn, when we look at those things. And I know in my experience, it has been an outlet, it has been that kind of salve and that something to soothe myself when I'm stressed out because I don't know where else to go, and it just gives me that dopamine hit. But then it has more negative effects because it does lower your energy. It almost lowers your testosterone. It lowers your polarity as the masculine, as the man. And so then it has a doubling effect. Not only is your partner upset because you're consuming porn, but then she also feels like you're less of a man, or she feels less of that masculine energy because we're depleting it on something external. We're not building it up within ourselves, and just taking a break, taking time off, and just seeing how much more focused you are, how much more energized you are, how much more just manly you feel because you're not depleting your energy in these external ways. It really is interesting to see, like, if you're struggling with porn and you're like, well, I can't find a date. Well, there's something energetically going on where you just don't look and feel like a man or masculine enough. And so there's something, they put you in the friend zone. They're like, oh, he's a nice guy, but there's not that polarity because you depleted so much of that masculine energy utilizing and consuming porn, that you don't have the flow or the potency, probably the best
Mm.
word, of that masculine energy that would attract that feminine mate.
Mm-hmm. And I can envision that blocking us in every area of our lives. And even the way that people are meeting each other nowadays through apps and online and social media, that energy flows through an app and the way you text and the way you come across.
Yeah.
Agree or disagree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think, you have a heart or a spirit, like I said, of consuming. You also end up not being able to be present. And if you're a male, if you're a masculine trying to connect to a feminine, then presence is key. And if you can't be present, then I'm going to say generically pronoun wise she, meaning that that feminine will instinctively be able to pick up on the fact that you can't be present and you can't be here. And on top of that, that your motivation or your goal is to consume. And and that I hate to say it, but and I have 3 daughters. The females now have almost become a commodity in our culture, something that is just consumed and objectified. And unfortunately, I think that baseline comes from the consumption of feminine in digital form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, social media is definitely contributing to that accessibility, as well as the misrepresentation of what their value is as the feminine.
Yeah, and even in my experience, when especially my younger years, I mean, you get so acclimatized to this instant gratification. You get so acclimatized to looking at the feminine as just a sexual object that you rarely are present enough to even find out who she is, what she loves, and get to that, like, who is this person in front of me versus this object that and it's your brain is just wired to look at them in that sexualized manner, and then there is no intimacy, there is no real connection because you're not present. You're just looking at the, like, what can I get, or let me objectify her. Ooh, look at her, your physical presence. She's, and then you think of it in terms of the porn. You think of it in terms of this objectification, and then she feels demeaned. And you may not even have said anything demeaning. Just the way you look at her, she feels the energy. She feels demeaned, and so if she has, if she's a strong woman and has self-confidence, she will reject that. And so it's, if you're looking to the feminine as this object of conquest, this object to be consumed, it may be time to look at your, I mean, if you're consuming porn at the same time, it may be time to look at your porn consumption. Look at the negative aspects, because most people think, oh, I'm just watching it at home by myself. It doesn't have any negative ramifications, but doesn't it?
Mm. Yeah, it certainly leaks out into every area of our life. And it, like your point earlier, it's an energy drain. But that's not the only addiction that we use to numb and suppress our emotions as men that can impact our relationships.
No, I mean, we've got thousands of channels, video games, isolation, alcohol, drugs. I mean, you name it, it runs the gambit. And for a lot of guys, it's not just one; it could be many things. Maybe they are drinking and they feel like, oh, I should stop drinking. So then they watch Netflix, or they play video games, or they go, consume porn or whatever it is. And it's becoming less and less common for us as men to be grounded and present within ourselves, much less anybody else. If we're not grounded and present within ourselves, how can we be present with anybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and each one of those distractions, keep us. Well, they are just that. Each one of those things that you mentioned, those outlets or addictions, whatever you want to call it, they are distractions, and they keep us from being able to focus on the now, focus on right here, right now. And to your point, JK, just being present, being grounded. You're literally being grounded. I mean, when you're consuming a lot of these things, most of the time you're sitting down. I mean, so you're literally not even grounded. But you know, and and it just becomes a way to escape the now, and to not deal with whatever it is that needs to be dealt with in your life, and it's a way out. And then again, it's a habit, and so it builds the practice of not being grounded, of not being present, of always thinking of the next thing, or always daydreaming, or fantasizing, or escaping. You know, in reality, you know, man, we as warriors, man, we can't escape every battle. We got to fight those battles, because they're coming after us.
Mm-hmm. And it makes us stronger over time. No doubt about that. So we're talking a little bit, we're alluding to this, the relationship with self as being the determining factor of whether we are more attractive to our partner, whether we are more grounded with ourselves. What is self-relationship? What does a relationship with self look like to you?
Go
Oh
ahead.
man, you gotta. I mean, it starts. Your being starts from the inside out, man. If you don't, you know, I think anyway, you need to. A lot of the work that we need to do first and foremost is in the mirror, and that mirror work is tough, but that mirror work is necessary, and that mirror work is the self work. I mean, as opposed to looking out the window, if we spent more time in the mirror looking at what's reflected back, and if we can get to the point where we, at the core foundation of who we are, if we love who we are, like love who we are, understanding that what we are is a work in progress, and that's like self grace and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, in terms of self, man, I mean, you know, you'll never have peace on the outside if there's no peace on the inside. And so it begins there, man. And we got to do that work, and that is work, man. It's a grind, because there's a lot of us, man. That there's a lot of us, meaning parts of us that we don't like. There are a lot of wounds and a lot of abuses and a lot of, you know, abandonment, and just a lot of things that we deal with from our past, from our childhood, and father wounds and all those kinds of things. That, man, I don't want to deal with that. Like, I just
Mm-hmm.
don't. I mean, it sucks. It's just tough, you know. And I'd rather escape.
Yeah.
I'd rather medicate, you know. But porn, like every other outlet, is a medication, and you don't find medication where there's no wound. And so you got to deal with the wound, so that, you know, so that you'll, if nothing else, you'll stop the hemorrhaging, stop the bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
But deal with the wound and let that heal to a scar.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, and then
Jason?
when we look at the relationship to self, I mean, just looking at, especially as men, we have to look at what the masculine energy is, what our purpose kind of is, especially in relationship to the feminine. We're the foundation. We're the riverbanks that gives her feminine energy room to flow, but has boundaries. And if we're not being solid and foundational within ourselves and being present with ourselves and healing those wounds, then our foundation is cracked. You know, we don't have that solid, strong, deep foundation. And I was working with a client this week, and we talked about that we have so many different little wounds, and it's almost like those Russian stacking dolls. You need to get those little wounds and put them back together. And the more of those things you deal with, the more of those wounds you look at, the more of those things you heal, the more of those dolls you put back together, and the more solid you are, the more foundational you are. And that's what all the feminine wants. They want a man who is foundationally strong within himself, so she can feel safe, so she can feel like she trusts him, so she can respect him. And if we're constantly looking outside of ourselves for validation, or to numb, or to run away, or to not be present, we're not building that foundational strength that she's looking for, that we can create a healthy relationship with. So it does start in the mirror, in the work. And it is painful, it is work, it is the grind. However, each one of those victories makes you love yourself more. Each one of those things you deal with makes you feel more of a whole human being, a whole man, a whole masculine. And if you're dealing with issues of, you know, not feeling like a man, or not being energized, or not having a focus and knowing what your purpose is, it's time to look inward and look at those things. Because as you put those pieces back together, then you become that man that you want to be. You become that model of masculine that you need to be. And it's going to be your own unique model. Don't look outside yourself and go, oh, well, Dave's like this, or Kirk's like that, so I should be like them. They are who they are. You need to be who you are. And once you find that, you do that process, because that was one of the things I want to bring that up too. There's this self-love thing. They go, well, you need to have self-love, but what does that mean? And that's what most men say, well, what does that mean? I don't know what it means to love myself. Looking at those scars and those wounds and doing that healing work, that generates a self-love, that generates that self-compassion, because you then understand yourself to a point of you can be present with yourself, and then you can be authentically who you are without feeling like you need to people please or change to be somebody else and twist yourself in a pretzel every day. That's
Mm-hmm.
that foundational, erect masculine energy that we're all in need of in this world, and we need in our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're referencing the shadow work that resonates so much with me. Like, no, it ain't, is not easy, that shadow work. And the way that the shadow appears in my life is through my limiting beliefs. Okay, well, I can access my shadow through those limiting beliefs of I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not safe, um, I'm not abundant, I'm not worth the abundance. All of these different there's about 40 core limiting beliefs, and I think I've tried to work on all 40 in the last year or so. But that's my access point. The wound is where the light is going to shine in through to access the shadow.
And there's a great analogy I love to use about the Japanese bowl, and there's a beautiful little song about that. Like the places where those cracks are, like the Japanese, they don't throw away broken bowls. They fill the cracks with gold, because it's those cracks and those broken pieces that make that where the light can get in, where the beauty is, and those are the jagged edges that we can grab onto. If you're not there and you're too slick and you're too plastic, and all your edges are too smooth because you're covering up and you're not doing the work, there's nothing to grab onto. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that creates that kind of bond, that intimacy in those relationships. We need those jagged edges.
Yeah, and that's considered artwork in their culture,
Yeah.
as it should be in our own. Kirk, what do you got?
That the doing that work, the shadow work, or doing just whatever the work on us as a man, that helps create self-love, because you're investing in yourself. And we as guys, man, what we invest in, what we spend time working on, we value. And and so when we value that thing, when we invest in ourselves in whatever kind of way, and I mean, it gets really close to sounding like, well, I got to be selfish, I got to be selfish, but you got to put your oxygen mask on first. But when we do that work on us, then it makes us better equipped to love ourselves, to value ourselves, because of all the work that we've done, in spite of the disappointments, in spite of the failures, in spite of all. Matter of fact, those are quite often opportunities. Probably the one and only time in my life I've ever been truly heartbroken, by a woman. I mean, I look back at that, and I flash back from that day to this day, and I'm like, man, I'm glad that happened. I'm glad. I mean, you couldn't have told me that when I was sitting on the side of my bed, like just crying like a baby, but now looking back, I'm glad that happened, because that was the catalyst for me to do a lot of work that I'm doing now, and that I have done. And it brought me to who I am today. And I wouldn't, not that I'm a finished work of art. I'm still on the journey, on the process. But man, I look back then and I'm like, I was in that relationship looking to her for validation. That's why it hurt so much. That's why it hurt so much when she threw up the deuces, because I put all of my validation eggs in that basket. And that was somebody that was not equipped for me to put all my eggs in that basket. I mean, she was broken herself. And so looking back on that, I'm like, man, I brought my boy to that relationship, when in actuality, I should have brought my man to that relationship. And so she wounded my boy, but that's because that boy was what I brought to her. And so when you do the work after all of that stuff, then you look back and say, man, that made me stronger. That made me more of the man that I want to be 20 years from now. If I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be where I want to be in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that working through the shadow of a transformational relationship like you're talking about helps me face the shame. The shame, when I put that behind me, leads to self-love and appreciation and building up my worth, because I'm not aiming to check things off my list here. I don't know what's next. There's not a list of to-do things on my personal growth journey. It literally is there to teach me how to flow through it, as opposed to do.
Yeah, and there's a great point too that Kirk brought up about the it may seem selfish, but we need to redefine that word because it's been used so much in that shame culture, especially that we grew up in of shame on you and don't be selfish. However, selfishness is just sense of self, and if you do those things to take care of yourself, you do those things on a consistent basis, they generate that self love, they generate that presence and that foundation. Then all you have left to do is take care of other people because your needs are filled. You cannot give from an empty cup, and those are the things, that sense of self, that quote unquote selfishness. I think for a lot of men, we need to be a little bit more selfish when it comes to our needs
Mhm.
so that we can give more and we can be more present and we have more energy for those people we love.
Mhm.
Yeah, when it comes to being selfish for our needs, sometimes that selfishness requires that we ask for our needs to be met.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
There's
we
a
can't meet all of our own needs ourselves. That's why we're seeking partnership. That's why we're seeking community.
there's a huge difference though between self-love and love of self.
Yeah.
I actually wrote an article about. I mean, self-love is building that kind of intimacy with yourself, the investing in yourself, and helping to heal wounds and all those kinds of things. Love of self is narcissism, and being a narcissist is totally different. I mean, that's maybe, I hadn't thought about it, but maybe one of the least healthiest forms of self. Um, but there is a distinction between loving oneself, or between again self-love and the love of me as a person. And in order to be healthy and whole, I think you need to invest in the self-love, so that you don't become a lover of self where you only serve yourself and everything and everyone is here to serve you.
Yeah, I can appreciate that angle at which you attacked that, Kirk. And the word appreciation for me hits home because, like, when I appreciate the things I do for myself, I appreciate myself that much more. And then I'm putting all of the insecurities behind me, or actually facing my insecurities that lead to that narcissism.
And it's a great point too because that sense of self, that self love, brings its own humility and humbleness to it because you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, you own those. And I know, depending on which psychologist you talk to, some say that narcissism is born and it's a mental disease or whatever that they can't do anything about. But in a lot of cases, that outward narcissism, that outward love of self, is really coming from a wounded inner child. It comes from that unworthiness, and it's a mask. It's a, well, if I don't feel that inside, let me project that outward, fake it till I make it kind of thing, and then it becomes a habit and a pattern. But when you are truly in that self-love space where you appreciate yourself and you appreciate your strengths and weaknesses, it brings that natural humbleness and humility where you can say, no, I'm not good at that. I need help there. So I know that's probably one of the biggest things that most of us men, especially nowadays, have trouble with. For me,
Asking for help.
asking for help, like I need help.
Yeah.
That's it, it's just, and a lot of that I think does come from that lack of self-love, because if you do love yourself and you have an appreciation for yourself, it just seems natural to go, hey, I'm not good at this, or I need some support here, and then reaching out and then creating it. And that's where that community is created. Our friends are our friends because they want to help us and they want to be there and they feel good in doing that, and vice versa. When we don't ask for
Mhm.
help, we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're just kind of ruining the whole mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That humility that you speak of is from our angle asking for help.
Mhm.
Like it takes a big man to ask for help.
Yeah, you want to
And
talk about what's courage and strengths. It's not the warrior on the battlefield swinging a sword all the time. A lot of times, courage, especially for the masculine, is to be humble and to ask for help and to accept support, because we feel so um, task oriented and like, I got to do this on my own. I got to be number one. I got to be the hero. But the hero in most cases never does it on his own. He has his team. He has his support. And so, being courageous enough to go, I don't know. I need help. That's real courage.
and within that
And
courage is vulnerability.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Kirk.
no, I
What's
was
up?
just going to say that at the core of that takes finding people, or a person that is safe, that you can feel safe with. Safety is it's huge for women, but it's also very important for men in a different way. But in order for us, then where you're about to go in terms of the vulnerability, man, you got to be safe in order to be vulnerable. And probably one of the reasons why we as men are not successful in relationships. If we're not, is because we're not open to safety with another person. We're not open to finding that and having that and being able to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is probably one of the ingredients to intimacy, and safety is right in the mix as well. But but being able to be in that space and be in that place where you can be vulnerable and open, and I can reach out to whomever, I can reach out to, to my guys. I have a thing. I don't think a guy is ready for true intimacy with a woman until he can have non-sexual intimacy with the man.
Okay. Yeah, I can relate to that through my practice of jujitsu and having physical intimacy with my male and female partners that's non-sexual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a great point to look at too, because safety for the masculine and feminine are, we both need safety to be open and vulnerable and to have that intimacy. But the safety looks different. For the feminine, it's that physical safety. It's that kind of structural safety. Like they want to know that they're physically safe. And for the man, he wants to know that he is emotionally safe. And it's interesting because when you look at like the yin yang, it's a great example of that, because we as men, we penetrate the woman from our loins, and they will penetrate us from the heart. And you see that symbol, and it's a good example of understanding what safety means to each side. Because if we can generate that physical safety, and that, and they can generate that emotional safety for us, then we can generate more of that intimacy and vulnerability. Because for men, it's, what are the main fears? For men, it's being perceived as weak. For women, it's, being unsafe, or being, physically unattractive. And those are the things that we must be aware of and be present with, and create a container for. If your woman is overly judgmental and not creating a space for you to feel comfortable, then how are you going to open up? And then if you're not creating a physical safety space, how can she feel safe enough to open up?
Yeah, how I see that in my life is I feel safe when I have a team player. Yeah. Somebody who helps me feel supported, not taken care of. That's not what I'm talking about. Just supported on my purpose, on my mission. Kirk, what makes you feel safe?
You know what? Yeah, kind of the same thing in terms of. Actually, I'm going to take that back. What makes me feel safe is acceptance. Probably acceptance of who I am, my yin and my yang, my good and my bad, my light and my dark. If I feel like I'm accepted with all parts of me, I mean, I can be equal sinner and saint, right? So, I mean, but at my heart, at my core, I'm a good man. But when I feel like I can be all parts of me and still be accepted, then I tend to open up more, and I tend to have that safety reveal itself in the form of vulnerability and trust and all those things. But for me, it's acceptance of who I am, in all parts of my being, my nature.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and it inspires me to ask a question about safety. If you don't feel accepted and you're hiding the dark parts and you're only showing the light, that will never allow your feminine partner to feel safe. In Jason's point.
Yeah, I mean, to even Kirk's point, like my safety for me is very similar. It's that acceptance, but really for me, it's the non-judgment. It's when I feel judged, I shut down, and then I do just like you said. I want to highlight my light side and my goodness, and then suppress the darkness. But as we know, to be a whole being, those things are there. The anger and the isolation and the things that we as men tend to stuff and not deal with. That's part of us. Those are tools and emotions to be a whole being. And for me to feel safe, it's really to know that I'm not going to be judged. Like I can be as, allow whatever emotion or allow that shadow side to come out and have them go, oh, okay, you're having a moment, you're triggered, and not feel like you can't do that, and that judgment that always will just shut me down. And then it's almost like that's a loss of trust. It's a loss of intimacy, and it takes a while to build that back up, because it's like, we as men, we do not want to be judged and criticized. It's
You
part
know,
of our makeup.
what we're talking about now, the whole idea of only showing your light, not showing your dark, isn't that like the definition of being a Mr. Nice Guy?
Oh, absolutely.
Very much so. Yeah. I have no flaws. And my covert contract is that if I have no flaws, you're going to fall deeply in love with me and everything will be easy. And that is absolutely not the truth. A covert contract that I was pondering earlier today is like modern dating. It's super hard out there, you know, for both the masculine and the feminine in our context today. And that covert contract that comes up is like, oh, well, if I'm not seeing anybody else, then they will also agree to that without me having the discussion.
Yeah, there's very, very much a lack of communication nowadays, especially when it comes to dating. It's been interesting because it almost seems like when you do attempt to have those conversations, that's almost like the death nail, because they want the honeymoon, they want to have the everything's wonderful and we're all plastic and perfect, and there are no jagged edges, there is no shadow side, it's all just lollipops and rainbows. But to have intimacy, to have vulnerability, you've got to be able to open up about those things, and it's interesting to have those. It's like, well, let's talk about something real. Let's have a real conversation. Let's talk about, you know, the stuff that's within us that we're working on. And they're like, no, I don't want to talk about that. I'm out. And with our instant gratification society, I mean, swipe. All right. You want to talk about realness? Nope. Swipe. Next.
And I
kind of go ahead, Kirk.
I almost think that relationships, and especially even the way we meet, has largely become digital, and has become digital to the point where it's two-dimensional and not three-dimensional. We're three-dimensional beings, but the way we relate and the way we quote unquote connect is two-dimensional. It's height and width, and the dimension that's missing is depth, right? And so, you know, when we lack depth, you know, it can be an indicator of where we are in our, I'm going to say emotional maturity in terms of relationship, relating and dating. But, you know, again, a lot of us meet people online. And so, I mean, so we start off two-dimensional. And how do you cross that third dimension barrier? Man, that can be tricky, but it's necessary.
I love both of these points that Jason and Kirk are bringing up right now, because I was thinking about both of these things earlier today. And there's a dating coach out there that hosts a very popular podcast. And the episode that I was listening to most recently was like how to create an online persona that attracts. First of all, that principle right there, that angle is bullshit. And I'll get to that here in a second. The second thing that I want to kick back to, Jason, is that death nail that you were speaking of, when one side or one person in the partnership or prospective partnership goes for that intimacy level of, I want to open up communication about this. Well, from my perspective, I was going through the thread of like, okay, who am I today? Like, how am I better today than I was yesterday? And through self-awareness, for me, that's the key. So my self-awareness around my avoidant attachment style is always wanting to test my partnership for safety, looking for that death nail so that I can walk away and be okay with it, right? So now that I'm gravitating more to like a secure attachment style in relationships, and when I feel my avoidant or my fearful avoidant attachment style come up, I address it, I say it out loud, and I say, this is what's happening for me. And then I have to understand if it's time for me to excuse myself because that's not healthy for me, or actually work through it and face the fear. So if I'm using my avoidant attachment style through self-awareness to look for a death nail by saying things like, hey, would you be open to having a conversation about what dating during COVID looks like? Or what are your boundaries around social distancing and dating right now? A lot of people on the receiving end of that right now, because they're scared also, and they don't know what safety looks like to them, they're going to tuck tail and run from that intimacy. But that's my opportunity to test the safety of the attachment style and the relationship and the polarity in the very beginning and say, this is who I am. This is who I'm bringing to the table through these questions that are healthy for me. And then I get to see that reflection back at me. Okay, who's not going to use that as a death nail and walk away like I would have in the past? Yeah. Jason, how does that land with you, bud?
What it sounds to me, and what it has been my experience, is that a lot of times when you project those questions to other people, it is kind of like, let me scare you off because I'm not feeling secure. And what has worked in the past for me, and what is the way I tend to operate when I'm conscious and present and everything, is by just expressing where I am, and then opening up the space for them to express. And then you'll know fairly quickly. It's been my experience that when you say, this is what I'm feeling, this is where I'm at, and you're not projecting onto them, then they'll decide for themselves if, oh, I feel comfortable with you and I want to express that, and then we can have those conversations. But a lot of times when you're like, it's almost a checklist kind of mentality, like, all right, so how do you feel about this, and where are you at with this, and what do you think that, yeah, you might want to have those conversations, but later on down the road, now it's like, let me express myself and create a safe, present, vulnerable space for them to express. If they don't want to, they don't want to. They've made that choice. However, kind of, it's the talking from the I statement. I'm feeling, and this is where I'm at, and this is what I feel comfortable with. How about you? And you just open it up and give them, instead of the interrogation of, it's a job interview and you have to check my boxes so I can feel safe with you. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes to be interviewed.
And it is a journey. I mean, it's a do you want to jump into the deep end right out of the gate? Probably not. You might want to go to level 10 immediately. But that's probably not a recipe for success. Um, Even though at some point you may want to get to level 10, that's a journey. And that's a journey that you got to be willing to have the patience. You got to be willing to have the courage, the guts, because it's going to take you being intentionally vulnerable as time goes on, and as you build that, as you build that up, it's going to take the courage to do the right thing, and to maybe even put yourself out there, maybe even take the lead as the masculine in that whole thing. But yeah, do you want to jump into the deep end right away? I would say probably not. But back to your attachment styles, DG. I mean, I think, yeah, when you're that fearful, that what is it? What's the um is it well, there's avoidant dismissive is kind of the opposite of the I don't basically
Sure.
the super attacher.
Yeah, the codependent.
Anxious attachment, right? So
Anxious, yeah, there you go, anxious. Do you want to go there all the way? Probably not. You probably want to let the person earn some trust. You probably want to let the person earn some vulnerability, and you want to develop that. But again, maybe that never stops? I don't know. I've never been married for 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know. Maybe that never stops. Maybe that's a continual journey that's called a relationship.
Yeah. Well, and you
right.
bring up I think the best point of this whole conversation when it comes to relating, it comes to dating, it comes to intimacy, patience. Because we're such an instant gratification society. One of the reasons there's such porn addiction going on, there is no patience anymore. There is no long game anymore. It's all about, what can I get now? What can I get? Oh, I can't get you now. All right, bye. Go move on. There is no patience, and so we have those weird attachment styles of the instant codependent, or the, let me test you and scare you off, and the isolation. Do we have the
And I will,
patience?
and I will say that in my life experience, I've learned that that women love the surface for the turn on, but ultimately they want depth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You take
Yeah,
that.
and
You take that however you want it.
I hear what you're saying loud and clear, and we'll leave it up to the audience members to sift through the double entendre there. So thanks. And I want to bring it on home by kind of like putting together the layers of what we just talked about. If I'm feeling safe in a relationship because I have a team player, and my avoidant attachment goes to, okay, what is the death nail? And if the team player steps up and says, no, that's not a deal breaker for me. That's not a death nail. When you talk to me intimately, when you talk to me vulnerably, I actually go deeper as the feminine energy who is looking for a leader. Kirk said it best. When I step up and take the lead as the masculine, it allows my feminine partner to become a team player. The more vulnerability that I lead with, the more I get back.
Yeah, and it's interesting
And
as
that,
you're having this conversation and we were talking about the shallowness versus the depth. I got the image of like a smooth, river rock. Those are really good for skipping across the water, but they're not really good for depth. You need both sides. You need, if you throw smooth stone, it's just going to skip across the surface. But you want the big, rocky boulder that's got the jagged edges. That whole thing that will get you the depth. So, but maybe you want to
and
be
the biggest splash as well.
That's right. I mean, maybe you want to be.
Here's the reality, guys. Some women can't handle it. Some women are just not built emotionally. They don't have depth. We want them to, but some just don't these days. And we have to accept the fact that maybe this one can't handle my level of vulnerability or my level of depth. You have a lot of guys doing a lot of work, and some women aren't doing the same level of work on themselves. And so we got to understand or recognize that, that in the world today, with a lot of things being upside down, a lot of men becoming more feminine, a lot of women becoming more masculine, and et cetera, that sometimes, us as men, as we try to take the courage and take the lead and pursue the depths and all those kinds of things, sometimes you're going to come across a woman that just can't handle it, that she's been abused and hurt so much and hasn't done her work, and whatever the reasons might be, she just might not be able to handle you, and let that be okay. There is someone that can. Let that be okay, and be ready to move on. Be ready, like you said, DG, be ready to excuse yourself.
Yeah, they're just not your person.
Yeah,
right.
And there's a great quote, especially, if you're a man doing your work and you're out there in the dating world, quote in Course in Miracles about rejection. Rejection is protection and redirection. If she can't handle your depth, if she can't handle the questions, or can't handle what you're trying to create, and she rejects you, that's actually a blessing. It's saving you time, saving her time, and redirecting you to somebody that's more of a match.
But a nice guy will start to push and like, oh, no, I can totally force this to be the outcome that I wish it to be.
Yeah. Well, I can make this work. Yeah.
I can make this work. Yep.
Yeah.
So within the last 5 minutes that we got together, gentlemen, I want to ask each of you to fill in this space that I'm going to create with a question for you. So, Jason, what is your wish for all men to understand that they could benefit from knowing most right now?
That they are good enough the way they are, that being who you are, being present with yourself, healing your wounds is the path to that self-love that we're craving and we're needing. And if you are lonely, if you are out there trying to date, the work on yourself is not wasted. That is the best time you can spend, because that's going to give you more of that self-love, which is what we're wanting to get away from is the chasing. We don't want to be chasers. We don't want to be hunters. We want to be magnets. We want to get our poles in alignment. We want to create that energy and build our energy up so we can magnetize the match instead of out there always chasing. And that comes from that mirror work, like Kirk talked about, the self love and the work of going inside and healing those wounds, healing the inner child wounds, and putting those little dolls back together so that you are a whole person, a whole being. And that takes looking inside.
Kirk, same question. Your opportunity. What do you wish men knew now?
You know what? Freedom is probably the gateway to everything that you're looking for in life, to all the great things in life. When you are able to have freedom, and what I mean by that is you don't have anything in your life that you would consider to be an anchor, something that's holding you down. When you're able to live free, you're able to live your highest purpose. You're able to live your highest level of intimacy and relationship, your highest level of masculinity, your highest sense of being, from a man's perspective, comes through the gateway of freedom. And if it's holding you down, if it's keeping you from whatever it is that you want to be, then you need to find a way to get rid of it. You need to find a way to deal with it and to kill that giant in your life, because I'm telling you, freedom is dope, man. And from a guy who's been in the depths of addiction to the guy who has killed that dragon, I can tell you, man, that I may smell like smoke from having gone through the fire, but I wouldn't trade it for anything, because it burned off everything that I didn't need.
Hell yes, man. Yeah, free from distractions, free from addiction, free from the anchor of a relationship that doesn't fit us, free from burden, free from limiting beliefs. That freedom, like a bird soaring on the jet stream, it's effortless when a bird, a hawk, an eagle is flying on that draft and it's hunting. It's hunting for its food. It's hunting for its purpose, as it's got eyes on everything below it, but it's not even wasting one bit of energy as it floats on that on that Airstream. Well, boys, I want to say thank you to you both. I know you're connecting from 2 different locations today, so thanks for your time. Jason, if your message resonates with people, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me is go to jasonbkendrick.com. Send me an email. My phone number's there. We've got lots of good, cool things coming up. So if you like to travel, if you like to get more connected with yourself, you want to create a better relationship in all areas of your life, reach out.
Thank you. Kirk, how can people get a hold of you?
Likewise, kirkmsamuels.com, kirkmsamuels.com. I keep it pretty straightforward. And if you go on Facebook, you can search the Mad Men of Masculinity, and we'll drop it like it's hot, because that's the way we do it. Yeah, that's a great way to get a hold of us, man. And I appreciate you, Dave, man. You're the real deal, man. I appreciate who you are, and everybody out there needs to get a hold of you for real.
Yeah, Dave, thank you so much for this opportunity and putting this together for us and bringing us on. And thank you for being on our show with us. And we just appreciate you and all the great influences that you bring to us. Because, I mean, I know Kirk and I are both going, I may need to get back to the gym, try to catch up with Dave.
One day I'm gonna try to look as good as you, man. I'm gonna try to be as good looking as DG, man. I want to be, man. I'm working on it. I'm gonna do a sit up when we're done. One sit up.
Yeah. Again, gentlemen, I am not your competition, and you just have to compare yourself to who you were yesterday.
Right on.
But I gotta say thank you, boys. It was a pleasure to be on the Mad Men of Masculinity a couple weeks ago, talking about the hero syndrome, and let's catch up again soon.